It began with the rain, those slow, deliberate droplets that seemed to mirror the sky's contemplation before it wept. I was present at the time, while immersing one's elbows in soapy water to remove the remnants of dinner. The apartment was just me, the gentle buzz of traffic outside and the clink of plates. Then I hurriedly wiped my hands and reached for my phone, which was lying face down on the counter. A FaceTime request from Silas had been received, and I was on the brink of answering it. I disregarded it, assuming that he may have inadvertently contacted me while viewing his preferred dinosaur program on the tablet, but something within me hesitated, and I am grateful that I did. His visage appeared pixelated and trembling, and his eyes were a fiery red dot. His voice cracked and scared, and his cheeks were blotchy and rimmed. "Daddy," he sobbed, laboring to breathe between words. Bianca became enraged and stated, "I ruined her day. She threw me out." My heart shattered. Behind my ribcage. "What do you mean, son? Out where?" My voice was composed, but it was, he declared. "I am outside. It is raining." As hysteria had not yet reached its zenith, my world came to a halt. There are certain moments that can be forgiven and framed with logic, but this was not one of them. My son had not left. Bianca, the elder sister of my wife Marielle, was intended to be monitoring him in the cold as the sky overtook him, while Marielle and her mother were completing the final wedding preparations. I placed my faith in them, which was a mistake. I snatched my keys, yanked my wallet off the counter, and flew down the stairs. Disregarding every red light that was on, I even grabbed a jacket. The road felt like a personal affront. My knuckles turned white as they gripped the steering wheel, and I was uncertain as to whether I was the GPS. Repeatedly repeated her irritating voice, as if mocking me. As I was sweating or weeping, I attempted to turn left after 400 meters, but there was no response. Silus was the sole concern when I arrived at Bianca's residence. I neglected to park. I left the car running and fled into the rain. The porch light was on, but he was not present. I observed him curled up under the awning, his tiny hands encircling his body, as he slipped while racing toward the side of the house. The dinosaur backpack was as if it could shield him from the cruelty of the world. As he was drenched to the bone and trembling, his lips trembled from both cold and the mud that streaked down his trousers, and his blue hoodie was stuck to his skin uncontrollably. He murmured, "Daddy," when he saw me, and it was as though those two syllables tore a deep-seated hole in my soul. I fell to my knees and embraced him, his tiny digits clinging to me in desperation. I did not speak a word. Of an individual who was uncertain whether I would attend, and for a moment, I harbored remorse for having permitted him to depart in the first place. I was good, Daddy. I didn't intend to ruin anything. I closed my eyes and kissed the back of his neck as he sobbed. His breath hitched. I carried him to the car, and you didn't ruin anything, my friend. You are the greatest thing I've ever had. I clutched him like a lifeline. He was freezing. I turned on the heater and draped him in my hoodie, then buckled. He entered with trembling hands, and my mind was simultaneously on autopilot and erupting with fury. I failed to even gaze. As we departed from the home, I was unable to prevent myself from doing something that I would later regret. Apartment. I enveloped Silas in every dry blanket we had. He appeared so diminutive and curled up as if he were a baby bird that had fallen from its nest. I placed him on the settee and prepared him a simple soup consisting of noodles and broth. Fed him spoon by spoon until his face regained its natural color. He eventually began to speak between bites, and she was screaming. "Daddy," she exclaimed, "you are becoming quite irritating." Subsequently, she opened the door and instructed me to exit. I clenched my fists extremely tightly. I gingerly wiped his mouth and kissed his forehead as his nails dug into my palms. It was only then that I noticed the red mark near his hairline was a contusion. Did she strike him? He nodded, but he hesitated. She accused me of causing her head pain. With a slipper, I once again closed my eyes, gripped by fury. I felt as though hot coals were piercing my bosom, piercing me from the inside. I tucked him in bed and remained beside him until his breathing resumed. His breathing gradually diminished, and he eventually succumbed to sleep. However, I was unable to doze off. Instead, I remained perched on the edge of his bed, contemplating his existence for hours. It is true that Marielle and I had our disagreements, but I never anticipated her behavior. The worst part was that I knew, in my heart, that the family members I had invited into our lives could betray my son in such a manner. The injustice they never did that night. Something changed in me. Something cracked wide open. It was no longer solely about comfort or appearances. It was no longer about being the calmest or the strongest individual. Concerning the preservation of my marriage, my son Silas, and that diminutive eye kissed his forehead as he trembled in the rain, determined to remain virtuous despite being treated like garbage. More time and murmured a vow into the darkness, vowing that they would not be able to get away with it this time. Not with him, not with anything. The following morning, the rain had ceased, but the tempest within me had not. He was still asleep, tucked in tightly like a secret. I had to protect his small bosom, which rose and fell under the quilt with one arm. There was a bruise on his temple that had darkened overnight, and it was wrapped around his beloved plush dinosaur. I gazed at it for an extended period of time, before I stood up, clenched my teeth, and retrieved my out. I did not make a reservation, and I did not knock. Upon arriving at Bianca's residence, I proceeded directly to the veranda and bashed on the door until the champagne was released. She opened the door, despite the fact that the sun was barely breaking, through the clouds, and the glasses on her foyer table were rattling. Door, as if it were just another leisurely brunch day. She was barefoot, with her hair up in a silk shawl and a champagne flute in her hand. She said flatly, "Oh," when she saw me. The dramatic entrance. I stepped forward. "Cute." Bianca raised her eyebrow and leaned against the doorframe, as if we were engaged in a discussion. He was acting as a little tyrant, running around and shrieking during the restaurant reservations. I instructed him to cease his shrieking, but he continued to wail even louder. I required a solution. I glanced at her once, then twice. "And your response was to strike him." She had the audacity to sip from her glass before responding, and then threw him out into the rain. It was a slipper, not a stinking belt. And yes, I did place him outside under the awning, mind you, wasn't in peril. He needed to learn some respect. I took a slow breath, steadying the earthquake beneath my skin. "You laid your hands on a 4-year-old child. Oh, don't be so frail," she scoffed. Rolling in the present day, fathers are characterized by emotion and lack of discipline, which is why children require boundaries. However, a line was eventually drawn, and the one-year brat has completely destroyed my day. She casually stated it as if it were a fact. I clenched my fists without considering that I was not raised to shout at others. Whether it was due to spilling wine on a dress or neglecting to get a manicure, however, I was not raised to allow women to strike my infant, and before I could respond, another voice entered the scene, striding out in heels and a silk robe. Delphina, Marielle's mother, surveyed the scene with her eyes. She regarded me with a sigh, as if I were an insect, and inquired, "Is this truly necessary?" I turned to her through the morning air, my voice frigid than the morning air she had given me. "You knew?" I inquired at a frown, as if I had disappointed her. She informed me afterward. "However, it has been resolved." I repeated your statement, which is to say that Delphina crossed her arms. Posture is as sharp as a sword, and boys must learn to appreciate their worth. Life does not provide for them. I gazed at her in disbelief, then returned to Bianca. "He is 4 years old, and you have placed him outside." During a thunderstorm, Bianca's scowl was resurrected. In all honesty, this overreaction. I briefly experienced exhaustion, and my vision became blurry. I did not perceive crimson as a metaphor. I was compelled to hold my tongue in order, to prevent myself from uttering statements that I could not retract. Consequently, I resorted to the opposite. I turned around and walked away, not because they deserved silence, but because I had finished warning individuals. I had observed their capabilities. Now, they would observe my capabilities. At home, I located Silas. He was awake and massaging his eyes when he saw me, and he smiled. However, that smile was not his. I kneeled beside him, knowing how close he was to being entirely broke by the individuals who were supposed to protect him, drawing him into an embrace. He emanated a scent of lavender soap, morning breath, and, "Safety, Daddy?" he inquired, his voice trembling, muffled against my chest. "Yeah, buddy. Are we going back to Auntie Bianca's?" I withdrew just enough to meet his gaze. I replied, "We will not return to that location." He nodded in agreement,